Hello and welcome. So we've had a budget which is perhaps one of the most important budgets India's faced for a long time. Why? Because it's the budget at the end of a pandemic, and a pandemic that has caused a major crisis in our country and our economy. And what's even worse is that nobody knows where this pandemic is going, whether it's going to, another variant is going to come up, another crisis is going to come up. Not only is economics full of uncertainty, but now we've got economics plus the uncertainty of medicine. The combination is really deadly. So one really has to feel for a finance minister who has to make a budget in the midst of great uncertainty. But still we have the standard reactions. Opposition saying it's a terrible budget, the government saying and industry saying it's a wonderful budget. You can almost predict this. Remember, we used to say that what people tell us in the breaks is so different to what they tell us when we go on air. And somebody even said that, tell them once you've gone on a break and actually put it on air. But we'll never do that. So, Dorab and I plan to go through the next hour with a fantastic array of experts and really get to the truth. Is this a very good budget? Is this an average budget? Is a budget that's the best under uncertainty? Dorab, we're going to have the good, the bad and the ugly. Actually, that's a bit unfair. Good, bad and ugly. It should be good, average, ugly. But you're always biased, Dorab. You find everything
run
bad.
Of the mill, though I think they called it the best budget for the next 25 years to take us to our 100th anniversary. I think it's an average, relatively pedestrian budget. Tell me something that you hadn't heard of in this budget that's news. Anything new that surprised you? Right. Distressed you, yes, but anything surprised you pleasantly? Same as it's all the same.
Cryptocurrency, but
no, that's for 25 like.
But anyway, let me bring in our wonderful array of guests and let's start with Amit Mitra. And I hope it won't be a knee-jerk reaction because I'm going to show you something which should please you. Let's have a look at a graphic on how big is the boost to the economy. We all said that this economy now really needs a boost, but a pragmatic boost. And in many senses, the budget deficit has not gone wild in the estimate of the budget deficit. We see the actual, but it's a little less than last year, 6.4. But how big is the boost to the economy?
What you haven't seen, Prannoy, is the fine print.
Yes. The fine print, yeah, I haven't, yes.
What has been given to the state comes with 5 conditions. None of them the states can meet. There's even a 4%.
Achha, what kind of conditions?
All kinds of conditions. These were there before. These come from the finance commission's conditionality. They just put it in without thinking of the fact that today they are facing, and I must take you there. Today, what is the government facing? It's facing unemployment rate highest ever in recent times, 8%. 30 crore people are unemployed. Now, inflation is raging at 14% wholesale price index. And consumer price inflation is 6%. Now, that's the reality. This government is totally disconnected with what is going on the ground because there is no address. And as I said to you once, inflation and unemployment cannot happen together. There's
just
no
one
country in
second.
the world.
Amit
So
Mitra, Dr. Mitra, just one second. Just one second, I need to interrupt you.
Sure.
You're saying unemployment is at an all-time high because of the pandemic. Yes, that's the reality. But won't this huge boost in capital expenditure, government infrastructure expenditure help reduce unemployment? And
now,
why do you think that 10 lakh crores for states will not be used? Why do you think that?
Now, what I'm saying is, with regard to your first question, what every country in the world is doing is giving a demand stimulation and giving cash in hand. United States is giving $2,500 to $3,000 a month. What has happened? their economy is growing at 7%. $23 trillion economy growing at 7%. Same for UK, same for Germany, same for France. Where is the demand stimulation in the budget? Did you hear of it? You didn't, because they are
Well,
looking at
capital
some
expenditures, demand stimulation. Let me.
Pardon me,
I think that's a
me.
question.
No.
I think it's a good question. It's a good question.
Prannoy, let me,
You get two
let
types
me
of demand
intervene.
stimulation. One is capital expenditure. The other is direct consumer expenditure. Let's ask Montek, which gives a bigger boost to the economy, Montek? Capital expenditure or consumer direct expenditure?
For a second. Capital expenditure is good.
Yeah, please.
But it takes time. It will be, by that time, the 3 crore people are unemployed, with 20% of them in the urban sector. What will happen to them? Who cares?
That's true. It does take time. Yeah. So,
at least 3
Montek, do you
years.
feel this kind of capital expenditure in an urgent situation, maybe part of it, the increase should have been in direct consumer expenditure, as Amit Mitra is saying?
Well, I mean, you needed to respond on both fronts, but let me clarify one point. I think what Amit is talking about is that capital expenditure leads to an increase in productive capacity. That leads to an increase in output later. But in the year in which the capital expenditure takes place, there is a demand stimulus from the investment that's conducted.
Yes.
I mean, for example, build a road, you employ a lot of people on it. So you can argue that the capital expenditure is another form of demand stimulus. Then it's a question of judging, do you want more?
Exactly. That's a good point, because the capital expenditure, while you're building the infrastructure, while you're building it, you are employing people. So you're spending partly
it depends.
on
Again, it depends.
assets,
I mean,
and partly on consumption.
If the capital
But I think Amit Mitra has a point.
Of,
I think Dr. Mitra has a point, that if you want something immediate and we're in a crisis, we needed to give a certain handout. But we're not quite as rich as America and France and England. So perhaps we could only give a much smaller amount. But you feel it should, Dr. Mitra, it should have been a combination of direct to the poor, help the poorest, and capital expenditure. Is that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. You look at West Bengal. We grew by 1.2% positive when India grew by negative 7.7%. How? Because we followed the first step, which is create demand so that the private sector can then later respond, meet their full capacity. Today they're running at 60 or 70%. They get to 100% capacity. Then they start buying machines, plant equipment. We did that. Why don't they learn from that? Minus 7.7% for India, 1.2% positive in West Bengal with the Mamata Banerjee government, where I happen to be a finance minister.
I must say it's not a well-known bit of data, but West Bengal is doing very well. You're competing with Bangladesh, which is doing very well. So the two Bengal states are doing competing with each other to do better and better. And the Sadar states have to catch up with the Bengali states. And let me get to Amitabh Kant. And there's a bit of a lot in this budget for you. You must be very happy. Cryptocurrency and all kind of non-tangible investments, but which is right up your street. But there's also one very important tangible investment which I'd like your views on, and that's on the massive increase in the expenditure on road building. I've never seen such a huge increase, and I've been doing this since before you were born, since you're a bacha. The massive increase on spend on roads, just look at the amount. This year, about 114,000 crores is the revised estimate from about 117. And what is the target for next year? It is just staggering. Let's move on to see the target for next year. 180,000 crores. That is an increase of what percentage? More, I think it's about 56, 57%. An increase in that amount, and unlike privatization, where there's a lack of credibility in meeting targets, on roads, this government has met its targets. So when any other figure, if you saw 56% increase, you say, forget it, it's just an imaginary figure for PR purposes. But Amitabh Kant, this will make a difference if you really hit a 50% increase in road building, right? Let me go on to Omkar. Omkar, we've seen how roads have actually been delivered and in an amazing, staggering increase. So this 56% increase in a target, is that fictitious, or you buy it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. In fact, if you were to ask me, it is almost like the piece de résistance of this budget. It is a staggering amount. I mean, just the National Highways Authority of India for the coming year, 2022-23, is going to get 134,015 crores. In addition, another 64,568 crores on roads. It's a massive increase, and it is extremely important.
It's quite a big increase, right?
One, huge increase. There's no question. It's extremely important for two reasons. One is certainly the NHAI is an extremely efficient organization, and the speed at which they build highways and roads, while nowhere close to China, is certainly way better than ever before. Second is the point that you touched upon, and also did Amit, is roads in one way or the other generate a huge amount of employment, not just in road building, but when a road is built, all sorts of things have to be set up for the road to be built. You have to have stones broken. You have to have bricks brought in. There's a huge amount of things which are on the side of a road when a highway or a road is built. And there is an enormous employment potential. Now, that employment gives money to people who are poor, and I'm assuming 90% of that money will be consumed. So when you have a marginal propensity to consume that is that high, you will have a multiplier effect because of what is going to be spent by giving people jobs in building these roads. It is, to my mind,
if I can just go back to
the most important thing in the budget.
Very, 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 it is amazing actually. Amitabh Khan, we tried to move you away from technology and imaginary cryptocurrencies to building roads, and also to the huge increase in capital expenditure. First, on the roads, can you say that, this increase of nearly between 50 and 60% is enormous? Will it be achieved? Is it fictitious? And B, the other point we wanted to ask you was, while capital expenditure has gone up, 10 lakh crores is going to states, but Amit Mitra says the conditions are so tough, no state is going to take it. So one at a time, whichever one you want first.
So, Prannoy, I'm a long-term believer that if India is to grow at high rates, which is critical over a sustained basis, infrastructure creation is really the key to that. So the increased allocation is very good, but implementation is really the most critical thing. If we are going to take time to implement these projects, if there are gestation delays, then we'll falter. So the challenge really is for the bureaucracy to get all the clearances, get all the lands, house all the approvals in SPVs, get the projects executed on a fast track. Also, this entire budget needs to be seen along with the last year's budget, the National Infrastructure Pipeline, and the National Asset Monetization Pipeline. All of them have to be seen in conjunction with each other. And to my mind, it's very, very important that while government is creating infrastructure, the operation and maintenance of many of these infrastructures should be done by the private sector to bring in greater efficiency in the long run. Infrastructure brings in a huge amount of multiplier impact. There are new models of InvITs, REITs, all of them have come up, which must be explored, and we must drive the early execution of these projects. So implementation really holds the key to the success.
You're absolutely right. Implementation is the key. And in that context, if I can just, I need to understand why Privatization has not been implemented. It's been a terrible. Just look at the figures. If we look at last year, the target was 175 lakh crores. And actually, till date, we've had 12 lakh crores. Now, they're saying they're going to make it up to 65 in the next 2 months, which is like, given that drop from 175 to 12. And next year, they've reduced it from 175 to 65 odd. But if you look at, have we really now more or less given up because of this huge drop in target? Just have a look at this graphic. From 175,000 crores to 65,000 crores. Are we giving up really? Are we being realistic? Let's not try. Down 63. Roads up 56. Privatization down 63. Are we giving up on privatization?
No, not at all. In fact, we've cracked the most difficult of it all, the Air India. We've just done this Neelachal path just a few days back.
That's the most difficult.
And once having
that
cracked
was
Air
the
India,
easiest, Amitabh Kant.
Yeah, that's
you were losing 60,000 crores a year on that. That's the easiest to privatize.
Yeah. But there were.
It's not the most difficult.
Yeah, but it was difficult. There were too many complexities. But then you have BPCL, you have BML, you have Concor, you have the two of the banks which have been recommended, one insurance.
So why didn't that happen this year? Why didn't these easy ones? Why didn't the easy ones happen this year?
No, so the Neelachal path has just happened, which was also tough. No disinvestment is easy in this country, considering the fact that, on the Hindustan Zinc, Supreme Court has ordered an investigation after 22 decades. So nothing is easy in this country, Prannoy. But we've pushed ahead in many of these cases.
But what you need is Arun Shourie back. You need Arun Shourie back. And by the way, I keep talking about Arun Shourie, but there is one other person who's underplayed. Yeah. And that's Praful Patel. Look at the airports after they privatized. Look at the quality of our airports. Do you remember what they were 20 years ago and what they look like now? Why can't we do this more? What's stopping us?
Prannoy,
I'm very hopeful.
I'll have to leave. May I just say one word?
I'm quite hopeful that we'll speed up the process of disinvestment.
Let Dr. Mitra say one word.
But more important than that, Prannoy, important than that was...
More important than Amit Mitra? No, nothing more important. Amit Mitra.
So
coming back to you, Amitabh Kant. Back to you.
I'll just say two things and that'll be it. First of all, it is shocking that the health expenditure, which is common to your listeners, has not grown at all. Education expenditure, just a little bit. And you know what shocked me? Agriculture, no increase. Rural development, 0.3% increase. And 100 days work. You're talking about roads. It is to 100 days work that people come and work on the road. That has been cut back by this government in this budget by 25%. From 98,000 crores to 73,000 crores. Who are they working for? If it is not health, if it is not education, and corporate taxes are 25%, but you and I pay 42% taxes. So who are
Dr. Mitra, you make a very good point. And I want to bring up the figures on health and talk to Kiran Mazumdar on this and to Sanjeev Mehta because, the overall figure
I'll have to leave.
is...
Thank you very much.
No, you must listen to the health figures because you.
No.
Okay, after that.
He's a very good friend. So
if you look at the appendix table, the amount. Let's have a look at the graph on the spend on health, specifically on medical and public health. Not the gross figure. Medical and public health is very clear. There's a wonderful table in the appendix which shows major changes from last year and why those changes have happened. And this is really shocking. And it begs the question, is the pandemic over according to the government? Just look at what the expenditure is on medical and public health. And, it begs the question, are we not going to have vaccines or healthcare anymore? because the expenditure on medical and public health, according to the budget documents this year, is in 75,000 crores, and next year 41,000 crores. It's there in the budget document, tucked away at the back. That's down 45%. Now, Kiran, is the pandemic over? Are we not going to need vaccinations anymore?
Well, Pranay, let's look at it this way. I think we are edging towards the end of this pandemic. I think the government has spent has spent a great deal on vaccination, and I think we should be very happy that over 75% of us are double vaccinated in terms of the eligible adult population. So I think we are in a good place. And I personally believe that you.
But one second, I just have to interrupt you there. I have to interrupt you there, Kiran, because you said this yesterday also. The government targeted 100% of adult population by 31st December. By 31st December, it hit less than 65% of the adult. Not 100, 65, double vaccinated. So we didn't do that well as we think we are. We must look hard at the data. 65% over against a target of 100%.
Pranay, let's not be that hard on us, okay? Because I think getting 100% vaccinated with one shot is huge for a country like ours, and getting 75%
government's own figures.
I know, but I'm just saying.
That's what the government said. We are going to do it by 31st December.
No, I know, but I think maybe we were
over-ambitious.
But the point is that, it is not for want of vaccines that we are not vaccinating the people. It's also, there is a bit of vaccine hesitancy. There is a bit of an impact of the Omicron virus, etc., etc. So I think from that point of view, let's look at trying to now open up the economy, because I'm more concerned about the services sector, which has been shut down, and I think it needs to get back into economic revival mode, and that the only way to do it is to open up the economy. So I feel we are in a safe spot. But coming back to your healthcare spend question, I think a large part of that number also relates to vaccines, and I think that's where the difference is between the 75,000 crores and the 41,000 crores, where I think they have removed the huge expense attributable to vaccines. And I personally
would you agree with that? Remove vaccine expenditure?
Well, vaccine expenditure was stated at 35,000 crores this year.
Can I pitch in?
You don't think we should keep that up? Sorry, Monte.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, the vaccination issue. Because I think if you look internationally, everybody says that nothing will increase the credibility of a country's potential performance than the perception that it's got the pandemic under control. I think everybody also says there's lots of uncertainties. You've talked about it. Now, the vaccine numbers are interesting because as I looked at it last year, that is for the current year, the government provided 39,000 crores for vaccines. And for next year, it's provided 5,000. So the decline of 34,000
that is just...
And that's the real question. Is 5,000 enough? My view would be that, look, yes, we were late. We missed the 100%. You never get 100%. So maybe by the end of this year, we'll certainly get 100% of the adults vaccinated. But then there are the others. But, virtually everyone who's got two jabs...
But by the way, Montek, one other factor you have to include. As you get towards 100%, a lot of people are 1 year since they had their last vaccine, and they definitely need another two.
If you needed 39,000 crores for this full year, you need half of that for the next full year. So really, we should have had...
Okay, I want to go to Sanjeev.
And, I would go further.
I would just like to go to another topic.
Let me finish, Roy. Let me just finish. See, if you want to create credibility, the government should place orders on the domestic vaccine manufacturers for an X amount for the next year so that they have no excuse.
I'll just come back to you, Montek. Montek, I'll just come back to you. I do want to talk to Amitabh Kant once again and to Sanjeev Mehta on, and both of you have talked a lot about helping the poorest at a time like this. In fact, I think Sanjeev Mehta has talked a lot about improving Manrega and all, which has not gone up much. But anyway, let's look. One big worry for me in the budget, and Amitabh Kant, could you explain it? Why has there been a huge cutback on food subsidy? Food subsidy, if we look at the data, this year we spent 2.9 lakh crores on food subsidy. And this is documented in the budget and the comparison given in the budget. 2.9 lakh crores on food subsidy. And there's a huge cutback now. It's gone from 2.9 lakh crores down to 2.1 lakh crores next year. That's a drop of 27% at a very difficult time. Why has this happened? There must be some reason for this. Amitabh Kant.
So Prannoy, if you look at, and I've tried to analyze the different schemes, BE to BE comparisons. If you look at several schemes, I mean, if you look at fertilizer subsidy, for instance, the allocation has gone up from about 79,000 to 1,05,000. In the case of food subsidy,
but I have to interrupt you on a matter of point. BE to BE is wrong. I've done this only for 30 years. It's RE to BE, the actual to the budget estimate. And fertilizer has gone down. The budget estimate for next year compared to the revised estimate for this year, fertilizer subsidy has gone down.
But Prannoy, the point is that government has said that wherever it is required, additional subsidy will be provided at the RE stage depending on the demand requirement for the year. So you have to compare BE to BE and RE to RE at the RE stage.
No, never.
You will have to do an apple-to-apple comparison. So if you look at PM Kisan, for instance, the budget has gone up. If you look at, of course, you will have to, depending on the demand as it rises, additional allocation will be provided at the RE stage. So actually all the revenue expenditure, in fact, if you look at all the total of the revenue expenditure, the BE expenditure for this year is more than the RE expenditure of the previous year. The totality of it, and I've done the calculation for each one of these schemes. So it far surpasses the BE of last year, but actually the totality of it crosses the RE of this year. So I don't think there is, other than, and you're right, the food subsidy at the BE stage is a little lower, but I'm quite sure there's no shortage of resources. As expenditures rise, the finance ministry will provide additional allocation for it.
That's
absolutely
very reassuring. That if
I can assure you that in all these schemes.
If I can get to Sanjeev Mehta, if I can just move to Sanjeev Mehta, because you have you've looked at the, we've just shown how capital expenditure has gone up, how building roads, amount of money has gone up, and it is phenomenal. But you've always wanted that, but you've always said that we should look after the poor at a time like this. And,
That's right.
This drop in that we've just seen is a bit worrying.
Yeah. Dr. Roy, let me give you a perspective. We have a scenario where the private consumption expenditure and in many ways the consequential private capex has remained tepid. And there was a very clear need to prime up the economy. And the only way was through government spending. Now, higher per public capital expenditure, which has been very impressive at 35%, and honestly, much more than what I thought it would be in infrastructure projects, could lead to what we call as the classical virtuous spiral. Where you spend money and it will have an impact on demand on several sectors, which in turn could result in job creation. It would result in more demand, more money coming in the hands of people, and the capacity utilization would go up, more capex would come in. That's the classic virtuous spiral. So at the end of the day, I think life, budget, just like life, is a matter of choices. The government could have increased the outlay on Manrega. It's still impressive at 73,000 crores. But when you look at Manrega, that is, yes, you get the immediacy effect. But if we prudently spend money on capital expenditure, front load it, not wait for the second half of the year, but front load it, you will start getting the benefit of what we are looking at. And that could certainly spur the kind of growth we are all hoping for.
I think Dorab has a question for you. Dorab?
Mr. Mehta, companies like yours survive on private final consumer expenditure. That's what it's all about. I've looked at the past 10 years in terms of constant expenditure. Last year was the only year, current year is the only year where it slipped below 55%. Earlier, it's always been 56% and more. And 1% of GDP, when it slips, it's lakhs and lakhs of crores. Now, if that doesn't move up, how are companies like yours and companies not so well placed as you are going to manage? I mean, how will we push up consumer expenditure if there's no money going into people's hands? Capital expenditure, money into people's hands over a period of time, not right away.
You're absolutely right. And that is the reason why we are seeing the stress on volumes, especially in rural India. That's a reality. But what do you do when you have capacity utilization in 60-70? Your private consumption is tepid. The only way would be for the government to step in. And I'm so glad that rather than have a huge drop in fiscal deficit or pull it back, I think the government has been very prudent and they have said, okay, we will spend the money and we'll do it in the way which can sustain long-term growth and get the private consumption up. I think this was a choice, and if spent well, perhaps could kickstart the private consumption expenditure, which we all have been waiting for.
Right. I think that's a good point. Okay, let's go to, I would like to go to Sunita Reddy. Sunita Reddy, we'd been talking a little earlier with Kiran Mazumdar before you came on. Very good to have you. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
About this, great, and you would be able to answer this question better than anybody else. It's about the drop in allocation for vaccinations. If we just, you weren't there when we showed the graphic, it's dropped the whole expenditure on what they define as medical and public health expenditure is going down from 75,000 crores to 41,000 crores, and mostly because we're not providing for vaccination. That's a drop of 45%. Should we not worry about the pandemic kind of reappearing, or is this a bit early to cut back on vaccinations?
So, Prannoy, I think there are two things here. One is that health is on the concurrent list. So it's both the central government allocation as well as the state government allocation. So as it was handled during the pandemic, both of them were involved in COVID relief. With regard to vaccination, the actual spend was 37,000 crores, and they've allocated only 5,000 crores. And I think the reason for this is twofold. One is that, most of India has had, at least 70% has had one vaccine, double vaccine. And the pandemic in its current form is an endemic thing. So, there are newer vaccines coming out. We don't know which one will be pertinent to which strain. But I think we have some level of protection, and definitely we have herd immunity. And as I think of budgets, the way that we do it is we're flexible. And the government has been very flexible, because if you look at the pandemic, even to healthcare players like us, they gave us low-cost loans at 4%. So the cost of capital was 4%. So I think when required, they are there.
When required, but shouldn't you, isn't the motto prepare, prepare, prepare? Have your vaccines ready, book the new vaccines, allow Covovax. We are not over yet. And you're saying 70%, that's 70% of adult population double dose. Many of them need another one because they had it more than a year ago. And other countries are talking about boosters. We call it precautionary. I don't know why. And many are doing four vaccines. So just, cutting back from 37 or 39,000 crores to 5,000 crores, we're not preparing ourselves. If it doesn't happen, great. Don't use that money.
Yeah.
But, I feel it
take
gives a
comfort
wrong
in the
signal,
fact that
don't
they
you?
have the money, Prannoy. I think they have the money and they use it. But I think the second most important thing is that, vaccines have an expiry date too. So, they are creating the next generation of vaccines. And I think that will come into play when required. In 2023, the formula could well change. And at that time, if we invest in clinical research, which I think is the big thing that Kiran also would have mentioned, is really what we need, investments into clinical research and
But we've got 9 months left for 2023. Anyway, I hope both you and
Prannoy,
Kiran
can
are
I come
right
in here
and we
just
won't need the
one
vaccines.
sentence?
Actually, Onkar, I wanted to ask
Prannoy,
you something
one
specific.
sentence.
And
Onkar
I
here.
just
one sentence.
Okay, one sentence, and I'll ask you something after that.
Just one sentence on the vaccination.
Yeah.
Which is that even if we do need a third dose, which we may well do, we are talking of maximum about 15,000 crores or 12,000 crores. Now, really, that's very, very small money in a union budget. And any government can pull it.
Need double
any
doses.
government can pull it.
No. Dora, I mean,
even if it is 30,000
that's
crores,
wrong figure.
any government can
People
pull it.
need
I'm
their
just saying
double
it
dose
can be
again.
pulled.
Anyway, I want to move on to something else, and that is, and if I can bring in Sanjeev Mehta again, while we're seeing a drop in vaccines, I don't know whether you welcome this or not, but we are seeing a very marginal increase in defense expenditure. Just have a look at the defense expenditure figures. There's no real increase if you take inflation. Even if we assume inflation at 5%, actually at the moment inflation is running at between 10 and 14%. So this year to next year, in thousands of crores, defense expenditures going from 37,000 crores to 39,000 crores. That's an increase of 5%. And actually inflation is somewhere between 5 and 10%. So, and by the way, it's similar for police, where there's an increase of only 7%. So there's no real increase in expenditure on defense and on police. Is that a good thing? Would you welcome that, Sanjeev?
Dr. Roy, I'll just bring in a private sector lens to it. Every expenditure has got a room to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Every area of spending.
Right.
And in defense, you will see world over, the spend is moving to more smart spending. It is not just about number of feet on the ground. And I think if we go down the route of smart spending, curtail expenses which are not effective, even with this increase, you could still ensure that the security of the country is met.
Can I ask a question?
Right, again, I hope, yes, please, Dora, please go ahead.
The defense expenditure can be broken up into capital and revenue. The capital is up almost 9%, over 9%, but the revenue is up only 1.5%. Perhaps lots of soldiers are retiring this year, and that's pension account, but only 1.5% is the increase in revenue expenditure, most of which is salaries. It's capital, which obviously wanted for the Chinese border and aircraft and whatever. But most of the expenditure is capital expenditure that's gone up. Revenue expenditure has gone up only 1.5%. Don't know whether all retiring soldiers.
No, I don't think so.
No. If there is a retirement every year, people do retire every year.
No, but we have to recruit as well. I mean, you have to keep the size
probably
of
not.
your
You don't need as big an army.
Armed forces. Yeah. Acha, at a time like this when the world is full of peace. Onkar, are you happy with, there are the types who say, defense is the main thing. And actually, one major factor in this entire budget, it's really not an election budget, which is a big positive. And defense is one of those big election budget things. But generally, you haven't seen a major election budget. Would you give credit to the finance minister for that?
It's not. I actually will give kudos to not just only the finance minister, but to the prime minister, because it could have been only too easy to prepare an election budget with SOPs, because there are at least 3 major states where the issues of election will come up, and next year as well with Gujarat. So it could have easily been an election budget, and it is not. So I'm actually very pleased that it is not. Equally, I want to again say something which I said yesterday with you, and you touched on it. One of the most disappointing, in fact, if I have to say the most disappointing thing that I've seen in this budget is this absolute failure of disinvestment. And whoever is listening, if this happened in the private sector, the guy in charge would not have had a job. I think it's extremely important that the finance minister and the prime minister completely restructure Deepam and get a young, solid guy to do the job, because this is ridiculous.
Right, quite right. But Omkar, you're being very tough. They were only 92% short of target.
Yes, of course. They did so well. I mean, Prannoy, if you only got 8%, which exam would you have ever passed, man?
Don't ask me. I think I got many 8%, like you did as well. But anyway, let's not get into that.
Yes.
Monte, I would like to go through each one of you and summarize. Monte, you don't even know what 8% is in exams. Anyway, you set a very bad example. Overall, fantastic increase in expenditure on roads, a good increase in expenditure on capital expenditure, and as Sanjeev Mehta says, if these are front-loaded, they could make a big difference. And you also mentioned that point, it'll go into wages, plus you'll build capacity. Will it be front-loaded? It's all about implementation. But then there are these worrying things like vaccines down to 5,000 crores, but budget deficit 6.4%. Overall, positives and negatives in this budget.
Well, that's a tough one, but I mean, very quickly. One way of looking at a budget is what's the macro stance? I think the macro stance is 0.5% improvement in the fiscal deficit from the current year. That's probably quite reasonable. And, they may actually end up doing worse. I mean, for example, if they have to spend more money on vaccination and also on Magnarega, there'd be nothing wrong with that. Maybe they can save elsewhere. But I think I would not say that on the macro stance that the government should have tried to tighten it even more. It's a good idea to have a modest tightening. It isn't important to have a tightening, but a modest tightening, and 0.5% is not bad. I think the good thing is on the tax front, there's nothing negative. So on the Hippocratic principle of do no harm, that side is not a problem. On the expenditure side, I support the idea of a big infrastructure thrust. The economy does need a demand stimulus, but spending on infrastructure is also a demand stimulus, especially if the spending is not involving huge imports of capital goods. And any form of construction type activity will mean more employment in the economy, which will then trickle down into demand. So that's good. I mean, the real issue is that in addition to all this, it has to be supported by forward movement on reform. And there we have the right sort of statements. I mean, privatization, this government's been very clear, whereas earlier it was never used as a word, but we haven't got anywhere. Banking reform, to my mind, if we are going to really recover. Now remember, the economic survey said growth of 8 to 8.5%. The budget says 11.2 nominal. So if you allow an inflation of 4, then an 11.2 nominal is something like 7% real. So already we are moderating, but I think 7% is not bad at all.
Inflation of 3.
Inflation of 4, I'd say. If you have inflation rate of 4 and a nominal growth rate of 11.2, gives you a real growth of 7.
Brings it down to 7.2.
Much
but
less.
It could be 3. Dorab, you have a question?
But it's still not bad. However, the real issue that comes up here is that, are we going to do the reforms that will make it possible? Because as I mentioned in your show yesterday, the underlying growth rate at the moment is about 5%. Because in the current year,
That's
9.2
worrying. That was
overall,
worrying, yeah.
13.7 in the
The
first half. The second half is
pre-pandemic
5%.
slowdown is the big worry.
It's
Yeah,
going to
you're
take
right.
the
You're right.
5%,
Yeah.
7%
Dorab?
has to be a little bit the stimulus, but the stimulus, the net effect of the stimulus is less because the fiscal deficit is showing consolidation. So it has to be that we're doing some reforms that will encourage the private sector to believe that, you know, the end of the road is near, or there's light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I would have liked to see a lot more stated on banking
Montek,
reform.
Dorab has a question. Montek, Dorab has a question.
No, I'm sorry, I have an observation that when Manrega goes down, if you need to spend more, there's always a supplementary budget, which the government brings towards the middle of the year. What my concern is that when they bring that budget, they will cut capital expenditure to ensure that they meet their target for fiscal
we
deficit.
can't say. You know, the thing about Manrega is not bound by the budget, whereas vaccines are. I mean, Manrega is a demand-driven scheme, and actually what the government should say to the state governments is, please employ the guys who turn up for work, and we will reimburse you. The thing about vaccines is, if the budget isn't there, nobody's going to place an order. And so therefore, in that area, I feel that we should have done much more. And what is more, we should have instructed the health ministry to place the orders so that, you know, the vaccine manufacturers.
Okay, let's go to Sanjeev Mehta. If we can go to Sanjeev Mehta for a moment. Sanjeev Mehta, a lot of the things that you wanted in this budget have actually been delivered. But there are the worries that you mentioned that you wanted other things that have not been delivered, like a drop in medical and healthcare, a drop in, money for the poor.
Also the urban poor that we were asking for. A similar scheme.
Yeah, urban poor you were asking. Yeah. So what would you have done differently? I suppose you would have kept the capital expenditure, etc., and the roads expenditure as it is, but otherwise?
You know, one thing, Dr. Roy, perhaps is that if we are able to deliver a real GDP growth of plus 8%, then the nominal GDP growth perhaps could be even much more than 11%. And that would mean there is perhaps a more upside when it comes to revenue collection, perhaps. Yeah, I would like to look at it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And but if I have to look at the budget in totality, and also accept that despite always in a big country like ours there are conflicting priorities, etc. The very fact that we have recovered what we had lost in the previous year, this fiscal, is fabulous. And what gives me hope of sustained growth, sustained performance, is this expenditure on capital expenditure, 35% increase. Second is the digitization. And if you look across, I can reel where all the finance minister today talked about digitizing the economy. The third also important bit is that government's commitment towards climate action and net zero is finding a focus in this budget. And of course, last but not the least,
the green bonds. The green bonds.
That's green bonds, as well as strengthening the ecosystem for the electric vehicles, urban sustainability, PLI allocation for solar power. So there are quite a few things when it comes to decarbonizing the economy. Last but not the least, we don't often talk about, but so important, that when the finance minister starts thanking the taxpayers, keeps the tax rates unchanged, broad policies are consistent, there is a continuous efforts to simplify the tax regime, and measures are taken to reduce litigation. The message that the government is giving to the business, hey guys, we trust you. And I think that is so important for the partnership between the government and business. It's a partnership really. And this is so important for the progress
the trust
of the
deficit and bridging that,
That's right.
Very true. Bridge the trust deficit. Dorab, summing up, what do you feel about this budget? What do you like about it and not like about it?
I'd like to actually, in place of that, ask Mr. Ahluwalia a question. The food subsidy, fertilizer subsidy has gone down by almost 30%. What do you think will be the impact of that on agriculture, which has been the only relatively bright light over the past 3 years?
I think there's lots that we have to do in agriculture, but I wouldn't say that increasing the subsidy is the way to do it. I know that's traditionally what all governments have done. I have no idea whether we'll be able to sustain the lower subsidy that is built in here. That we'll have to see from the what happens to fertilizer prices and so forth. But it's much more important to fix things like the water management, the irrigation system, and things like that, rather than being given subsidies to agriculture. But that's really not, in my view, that is not the route to get to a viable agricultural system. Now, it's politically very difficult.
That's because, that's because you're not a farmer, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I think
last words with you.
I would say that, all around the world, it's unfortunate, but around the world, farmers have been led to believe that the way to get prosperous farming is to increase subsidies in farming. But if you look at what succeeds in India, I mean, the milk revolution is not led by subsidies. And that's where really India's production has changed. So I think this myth that agriculture must be supported by subsidies, a lot of agricultural economists have argued against it. Ashok Gulati and people like that.
Yes,
I think we need to do some serious.
We can just move on for last 30 seconds each for Onkar and Mr. Mehta. Onkar, 30 seconds.
Well, quickly, Prannoy, I think none of us talked about it, but in addition to everyone saying the increase in capital expenditure was excellent and good and the right way to go, I think people must realize that the government has done spectacularly well in collecting gross tax revenue under every single head of tax revenue, by the way, not just GST, under corporation tax, income tax, wealth, under customs and GST. And the government has now got
Can we just move
a very good,
that's a point.
very
I'm glad
good
you raised
upward
it.
movement
We should have
on revenue.
No
one has touched about it, but that revenue that they are expecting,
Mr. Mehta.
9.6%.
Yeah.
9.6%, that's going to give them a lot of lift.
Dr.
Last
Roy,
word, last word. Very good point,
Dr. Roy, speaking to my industry colleagues, I feel that the budget has unleashed another dose of hope and optimism in a period where the pandemic clouds are still not blown over.
Yeah. That is really important because sentiment makes such a difference to investment and
absolutely
growth as a result.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Dorab, you ducked giving a summary, you just asked a question instead, but thank you very much and we'll make you work harder next time. Thank you all very much indeed. Bye-bye.